Hi, everyone. I am talking about my new book, which is called Gateway Between Worlds, Saints and Heretics. So, my book, which I have been working on for the last few years, I went to get my master's degree in history from a worldwide top 25 university. This is the University of Edinburgh, where I undertook my master's degree and I graduated with merit. And I learned so much while there. I learned so much just in terms of how to write historically, how to analyze historical arguments. And I also had so much access to so much information. I had access to all of the online libraries, the databases, which I used very well, if I do say so myself. I spent pretty well all of my free time scouring those databases so I could actually create this book. This book is a deep dive, an investigation into my own dear grandmother's stories that she told me before she passed away. And one of those stories I'm going to share with you right now is a very dark, harrowing story. Well, it's dark, and it is a trigger warning for anybody. But it does have to do with World War II, so we know that there was a lot of tragic events, and this one is one of the most tragic I have ever heard. And it happened actually to the Serbian Orthodox people of Croatia. So my grandmother told me that there was a woman that went to our local church here in Canada, and she actually lived through this event. So it wasn't my grandmother directly. She had her own stories, but this was about what happened to a Serbian woman locally. She's now since passed away, but she was alive when I was a child, and this is what she went through. So in the middle of the night, what happened was the Croatian Ustaše, these were a very Catholic clericalist group. They were fascists. They were ultra Catholic, and they herded all the local Serbians into the Serbian Orthodox Church of that area, which was called Glina. So Glina is in Croatia. I put it in quotation marks because it's very fraught. And when you read my book, you will discover that so many Serbians have occupied Croatia for centuries, but they have actually been kicked out of their homes, and the memory of this has actually been eradicated out of Western consciousness. And why is that? Because it's part of Catholic dogma. So, part of Catholic dogma is that heretics and schismatics should not just be killed, but their memory should also be killed. And this we saw happen with the Crusades and the Inquisitions. This is why heretics, they were burned and their ashes were thrown into streams or rivers so that nobody of the heretics family could retain their ashes, could remember them. So essentially, it was about trying to force Catholic dogma by any and all means necessary. It was essentially thought control of the most extreme nature. So going back to Galena, all of these Serbs were herded into this Serbian Orthodox Church, whereby a Ustaše asked them who wants to convert to Catholicism. Now, obviously, they did not realize this was a life or death question, but it was. And I think maybe only one or two said yes, and they were taken away. And the rest were brought inside the church where the Ustaše locked them inside and took out knives and then started slicing everyone's throats, including babies, children, the elderly. There's obviously screaming and crying, and people were throwing themselves off of the top of the church down again because of the horrendous nature of this event. And there was actually, so the woman, going back to the woman, is she was one of the only survivors because she had lost consciousness and her body was hidden underneath the other bodies of those who were murdered. So just imagine that she woke up to find her entire family. She went with her two children and her daughter's grandchild. Sorry, her grandchild, her daughter's child. They were all killed. So the whole entire village was killed. Her whole family was killed, and only she was left. And this poor woman woke up to this realization that everybody she loved had been brutally murdered and she was now covered in their blood. And this was a story that my grandmother told me before she passed away in 2021. She told me a few months before she passed away. And me being a historian, I had never heard of such an event in all of my history classes. And I took it upon myself to understand this event. And what I did understand is that that terrible event that happened in the Galena Church was just one of thousands of tragic events that made up this genocide that happened in World War II against the Serbian Orthodox people, which I call and many other scholars call a crusade. So this was not like what the Nazis were doing. This was far more primitive and it was very much done in the Crusader fashion. So I talk about all that in my book, and I use peer-reviewed academic sources that I found these sources while I studied at the University of Edinburgh. This is where the bulk of my sources have been taken from. Other sources have been taken directly from very exclusive, hard to access books in Serbia that I got through very special contacts that I have. So you're going to find exclusive content. You are going to find very academic material that has been synthesized for you, that has been condensed into an easy to read book. So it's about maximum understanding, maximum efficiency. I'm not wasting your time with copious, useless details. It's all important. Every word matters in my book, and I made it concise, but it's still about 550 pages in total, which is a big improvement from when I first wrote this book. It was 1,000 pages. I cut out a lot of the fat, as people would say, so I'm leaving the meat for you, just the very most important. It's like the nectar of my work. It is the nectar of thousands of hours that I have poured into this work. If I'm being completely honest with you, this book is like my child. Okay? I don't have children, but I can honestly say that this work is my baby. It is my child. It means so much to me. It it is going to blow your mind in terms of how the geopolitics of the world functions. And that's the really cool thing is James Muir says that when we pull at one thing in nature, we find that it's attached to everything else. So you're going to learn not just about the Balkans, but how the world functions, how it's been operating for the last several decades. You're going to learn about imperialism. You're going to learn about the mechanization of power. How does power function in our world? Who's controlling the world and why? And how the framework in our world has shifted over the course of a few centuries from religious to economic. So that is exactly why I have framed it as saints and heretics. Who is really the saint and who is really the heretic? So the saint is the one that upholds the hegemonic structure of a power, whether it be the Vatican or whether it be the U.S. So, for example, a saint of the Vatican would be a very devout Christian. That would be an example, and a heretic would be anyone who does not follow the Catholic religion, which could be an Orthodox Christian, it could be a Muslim, it could be a pagan, it could be a Bogomil. So we can see how everything is actually framed by power. And then if we look at it from an economic standpoint, who would the saint be of the capitalist system? Well, the saint would obviously be the capitalist. Um, it could be the person that just mindlessly consumes all day long, or the wealthy billionaire. And the heretic of the capitalist system is, of course, the communist or the socialist. So this is why I have framed my book as that. It's also framed as empire versus the periphery. So empire is the imperialists, the few property owning, usually men that run the world versus everybody else, versus everybody else. The property list, the women, the minority groups, which make up the vast majority of the world, they're really the periphery, or we can call them the oppressed, the working class. Okay. So, this is how I have written my book for you so that you can really understand geopolitics. And yes, it is primarily about the Balkans, but you will learn about the entire world. You'll especially learn about Europe. You're going to learn what Europe really is. You're going to learn about the white race, what the white race really is. It's really a construct of Europe, and Europe is really the kingdom of it's really a Catholic empire. It's really the Vatican's empire. So I break all that down for you. I break it down from the religious standpoint, how crusades are still have recently happened in our modern world, and I break down how things have shifted from a religious framework of power to an economic framework of power. I also write some comparative essays as well. I do some deep dives into other things too. Talk about the Cold War, for example. I also talk about the Yugoslav wars as well. I talk about the corruption of The Hague. So there's so much that I talk about and I break down in this book, which is the work of several years of extremely dedicated work, pouring thousands of dollars, so much of my time, energy, effort, traveling the world, going back and forth to Serbia to write this book so that I can share it with you. Because that's truly what I believe in, is making works accessible for everyone. Okay? That is who I wrote this book for. I wrote it for the world. I put that in my dedication is yes, I wrote it for my family. I wrote it for the Serbian and Yugoslavian people. And the final dedication is to you, is to the world. So I truly believe that when we each understand and do our part to, make this world a more just, fair, equitable place, um, and we're all, working towards that, then we're creating the kind of world that we all want to be part of. So that is why I have written this book, and I am so happy to share it with you. It's called Gateway Between Worlds, Saints and Heretics by yours truly, Emma Lunchad.